John and Patsy didn't have anything to do with killing my little girl. And if they did, if it's proven that they did, I'll never trust anybody the rest of my life, because I never seen anything but a loving, kind, wonderful family.
I think that maybe Patsy had multiple personalities. I saw that in her one day, and I think that she may have gotten upset with JonBenét for some reason, and she may have hit her and not meant to hurt her. I don't think she meant to hurt JonBenét, you know. I think it was an accident, and then it just continued from.
Linda Hoffmann Pugh, once a loyal defender of the Ramsey family, stood by their side as their trusted housekeeper. But as the JonBenét Ramsey case unfolded, her doubts grew, leading her to suspect Patsy Ramsey's involvement in the tragic murder. Yet, Linda herself remains a lingering suspect, her intimate knowledge of the family's life casting a shadow of doubt that keeps her entwined in this unsolved mystery. And are her words trustworthy? Who is Linda Hoffmann Pugh? Linda Hoffmann Pugh was born in Lyons, Kansas, where she grew up in a modest farming family with 3 brothers and 1 sister, being the youngest sibling. Her father, a wheat farmer who struggled financially, later worked as a ditch digger for her brother's construction business in Fort Morgan, Colorado, after the family relocated when Linda was 13. Her father battled alcoholism and passed away in 1986, while her mother was 41 when Linda was born. Linda dropped out of school at age 15 and later married, giving birth to 5 children before divorcing. She eventually remarried Mervyn Pugh, who had a minor criminal history involving theft and check fraud. Together, they raised 6 children, including their 13-year-old daughter, Ariana, in 1996, and Linda became a grandmother to 10. They lived in Fort Lupton, Colorado. Professionally, Linda worked as a housekeeper, initially employed by Merry Maids, a bonded cleaning agency, before taking on private clients. She also supplemented her income by delivering newspapers for the Greeley Tribune alongside her family. Known for her dedication, Linda managed a demanding schedule, balancing her cleaning jobs with family responsibilities. She took pride in her work, serving clients such as a doctor's wife and a lawyer in the Greeley area, where her reliability and thoroughness were valued. Her journey to becoming the Ramsey family's housekeeper began when Merry Maids assigned her to clean the expansive Ramsey home in Boulder. Initially, she worked as part of a 4-person team, tasked with managing the upkeep of the large household. The Ramseys, impressed by Linda's dedication and thoroughness, took notice of her work ethic during these visits. Patsy Ramsey, in particular, appreciated Linda's reliability and the care she put into her tasks, which ranged from cleaning to organizing household items. After a short period with Merry Maids, Patsy Ramsey approached Linda with an offer to work directly for the family as their private housekeeper. By late 1995, Linda transitioned from the agency to a full-time role with the Ramseys, agreeing to work 3 days a week, Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, for $72 per day. Her schedule typically ran from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m., aligning with her daughter Ariana's school hours, though she occasionally worked additional days, including Saturdays or holidays, to accommodate the family's needs. The Ramseys' trust in Linda was evident when they provided her with a key to their home, granting her access to manage her duties independently. In October 1996, the family further showed their appreciation by giving her a $300 bonus, reflecting their satisfaction with her work. In the house, she often handled general cleaning tasks, ensuring the house remained tidy despite the family's busy lifestyle. This included vacuuming, dusting, and cleaning surfaces throughout the large residence, often tackling cluttered areas like the kitchen, where she frequently wiped down counters covered with peanut butter or spilled Ovaltine. Laundry was a significant part of her duties, as she managed the family's clothing, particularly organizing JonBenét's extensive wardrobe of pageant dresses, turtlenecks, and accessories, which were meticulously sorted into drawers. Linda also dealt with the children's scattered belongings, picking up socks, shoes, toys, and books left by JonBenét and her brother, Burke. Her work gave her intimate knowledge of the Ramsey family's schedules, their daily habits, and, most importantly, the layout and structure of the house, as she navigated every room and storage area while performing her tasks. Beyond routine cleaning, Linda took on additional tasks to support the household's needs. She occasionally drove JonBenét to dance classes or other extracurricular activities when Patsy was unavailable, ensuring the children's schedules were met. Linda also assisted with special projects, such as helping prepare for the family's Christmas party in December 1996 by organizing decorations and supporting Patsy with event logistics. During the Thanksgiving holiday in 1996, she coordinated with her husband, Mervyn, daughter Ariana, and other family members to retrieve Christmas trees from the basement and set them up in various rooms. Additionally, Linda managed specific items, like moving Patsy's paint tote to the basement or hiding Burke's scout knife in a cupboard to prevent him from whittling wood shavings around the house. Her work required adaptability as she balanced Patsy's requests with the demands of maintaining a busy household, all while gaining a deep understanding of the family's routines and the intricate details of their home. Her journey to becoming the Ramsey family's housekeeper began when Mary maids assigned her to clean the expansive Ramsey home in Boulder. Initially, she worked as part of a 4-person team, tasked with managing the upkeep of the large household. The Ramseys, impressed by Linda's dedication and thoroughness, took notice of her work ethic during these visits. Patsy Ramsey, in particular, appreciated Linda's reliability and the care she put into her tasks, which ranged from cleaning to organizing household items. After a short period with Mary maids, Patsy Ramsey approached Linda with an offer to work directly for the family as their private housekeeper. By late 1995, Linda transitioned from the agency to a full-time role with the Ramseys. For the Ramseys themselves, she described Patsy as a woman who could be kind and considerate, often going out of her way to ensure Linda felt appreciated, such as giving her a $300 Christmas bonus in October 1996. However, Linda also observed a volatile side to Patsy, characterizing her as erratic and possibly bipolar. In her testimony before the 1999 grand jury, Patsy's moods could swing dramatically. One moment she was warm and engaging, the next irritable and sharp, particularly when dealing with JonBenét's bedwetting or defiance. Linda recalled a specific incident at the Ramseys' Christmas party on December 23, 1996, where Patsy grew visibly frustrated with JonBenét over her refusal to wear a particular dress, raising her voice in a way that felt uncharacteristic for such a public setting. Patsy's belief in miracles further colored Linda's view of her. She recounted how Patsy attributed her recovery from stage 4 ovarian cancer to prayers from church members and claimed the spirit of John's deceased daughter from a previous marriage appeared in a dream to guide her healing. This blend of warmth, volatility, and mysticism shaped Linda's perception of Patsy as a woman teetering on the edge of emotional stability. Linda's observations of Patsy's relationship with John Ramsey revealed a marriage marked by emotional distance. She noted that in her time working for the family, she never saw John and Patsy display physical affection. No hugs, hand-holding, kisses, or even terms of endearment. Their interactions felt cold and strained, as if they were merely coexisting for the sake of their children. Patsy confided in Linda about her discomfort with intimacy, particularly oral sex, describing John's body odor as salty and sour, and admitting to gagging at the thought of it. In one candid moment, Patsy asked Linda how to overcome this revulsion, to which Linda suggested thinking of it as an act of love. Linda also witnessed Patsy's distress after John berated her for being a poor homemaker and cook, an argument that left Patsy crying through the night. Linda suspected John's anger stemmed more from sexual frustration than domestic shortcomings, a theory rooted in Patsy's own admissions about their strained physical relationship. This lack of warmth and mutual support, in Linda's view, underscored a dysfunctional marriage that added to Patsy's emotional burden. In the context of JonBenét's murder, Linda firmly believed Patsy was responsible, though she insisted the killing was unintentional. She argued that Patsy's knowledge of the household made her the only plausible culprit. For instance, Linda pointed to a red Swiss Army knife belonging to Burke, which she had confiscated and hidden on a cupboard ledge near JonBenét's room in November 1996. This knife was later found near JonBenét's body, and Linda claimed only she, Patsy, and John knew its location. Another damning detail was Patsy's attire. On the morning of December 26, 1996, when police arrived, Patsy was still wearing the red and black outfit from the previous night's Christmas festivities. Linda found this highly unusual for a woman known for her meticulous appearance and frequent outfit changes, suggesting Patsy had stayed up all night staging the crime scene. Linda also highlighted Patsy's psychological state, noting she was exhausted from a whirlwind of stressors: her upcoming 40th birthday celebration, John's business success parties, multiple December gatherings, a New York shopping trip with friends, managing JonBenét's pageant commitments, and preparing for a second Christmas in Michigan. These pressures, combined with Patsy's history of cancer treatment and fading beauty, pushed her to a breaking point, according to Linda. Linda's theory of the crime centered on JonBenét's chronic bedwetting, which she claimed drove Patsy to the edge. She described how JonBenét's accidents were a recurring source of frustration, with Patsy often finding wet blankets in the dryer. By late 1996, Patsy had switched from pull-ups to plastic mattress covers, which Linda saw as a sign of her growing impatience. On the night of December 25, 1996, Linda speculated that JonBenét wet her bed again, triggering an explosive reaction from an already overwhelmed Patsy. Linda envisioned Patsy, still in her party clothes, dragging JonBenet to the bathroom in a fit of rage, a pattern she claimed to have witnessed before. She recounted instances where Patsy would take JonBenet to the bathroom, shut the door tightly, and allow the child's screams to go unheard, suggesting a history of harsh discipline. Linda's chilling accusation was that on that Christmas night, Patsy, wielding a flashlight, struck JonBenet in the pelvic area and head, intending to scare rather than kill her. When JonBenet stopped breathing, Linda believed Patsy panicked, realizing her daughter was dead or near death. Faced with this tragedy, Linda theorized that Patsy orchestrated an elaborate cover-up. She suggested Patsy hurt JonBenet with a white nylon cord, crafted a garrote from a paintbrush handle taken from a paint tote Linda had brought to the basement on December 23, bound her hands, and placed her in the hidden wine cellar, a room Linda insisted only Patsy and John knew about. The white blanket wrapping JonBenet's body, along with a Barbie nightgown stuck to it from static in the dryer, further pointed to Patsy's rushed attempt to stage a kidnapping. Linda's most compelling evidence was the ransom note, which she claimed bore Patsy's distinctive handwriting and phrases like, "Hence, good Southern common sense," and "fat cat," terms Patsy used in notes or conversations. The note's demand for $11,000, matching John's Christmas bonus, reinforced Linda's belief that Patsy authored it to mislead investigators. She argued the note's creation took hours, explaining why Patsy never changed her clothes. Linda's portrayal of Patsy's mental state painted a picture of a woman unraveling under pressure. She noted Patsy's fondness for Beringer Chardonnay, kept in a walk-in refrigerator, and hinted that Patsy may have turned to alcohol to cope with stress, sarcastically referencing her dipping deeply into the Chardonnay. Linda also pointed to a mysterious 911 call from the Ramsey home on December 1996 during a party with 20 guests, suggesting Patsy was already out of sorts and emotionally unstable. Patsy's battle with ovarian cancer, her obsession with maintaining a perfect family image, and her distress over her fading beauty compounded her fragility. Linda believed these factors, combined with JonBenet's bedwetting, pushed Patsy to a momentary loss of control, resulting in a tragic accident rather than premeditated murder. Linda's allegations carried weight due to her intimate knowledge of the Ramsey household, but they were not without flaws. She admitted to having no direct evidence of Patsy's actions that night, relying instead on her observations and assumptions. Her claim that Patsy disciplined JonBenét behind closed bathroom doors, where screams went unheard, was particularly damning, as it suggested a pattern of potential abuse. Yet, Linda insisted the fatal blow was unintentional, a desperate act by overwhelmed by exhaustion and frustration. The fact that Patsy wore the same outfit from the night before struck Linda as a critical clue, contradicting Patsy's polished persona and implying she never slept. While Linda's testimony before the grand jury in September 1999 provided a platform for her accusations, she felt stifled by Colorado's confidentiality laws, which prevented her from fully sharing her story. Her planned book, The Death of an Innocent, aimed to expose these details but was never published, leaving her narrative largely confined to interviews and legal proceedings. Despite her certainty, the lack of physical evidence tying Patsy to the crime and the dismissal of Linda's defamation lawsuit in 2002 underscored the speculative nature of her claims, though they remained a haunting perspective on a still unsolved case. For John Ramsey, Linda described John as a distant, emotionally reserved figure who played a minimal role in household and parenting duties. According to Linda, on the night of December 25, 1996, John was likely asleep, heavily sedated by a sleep aid he regularly used. She claimed he wouldn't have heard cannon go off next to his bed, suggesting he was unaware of any events until Patsy woke him the next morning after discovering the ransom note. Linda's assertion paints John as a passive presence, detached from the immediate circumstances surrounding JonBenét's death. In Linda's view, John was not the primary perpetrator in JonBenét's death, but may have played a role in covering it up. Linda suggested John, unaware of the initial act due to his deep sleep, later learned of Patsy's actions and helped stage the scene, complete with a garrote, tied hands, and a ransom note to mislead investigators. Her suspicion was fueled by John's knowledge of the hidden wine cellar where JonBenét's body was found, a room only he and Patsy knew about, as well as his awareness of a Swiss Army knife belonging to Burke and hidden by Linda, found near the body. Linda's statements also touched on John's broader role in the family. She described him as useless in domestic matters, leaving Patsy to handle everything from childcare to organizing 2 Christmas celebrations, one in Boulder and another planned in Michigan, where John had arranged a pilot for their trip. This logistical focus on big picture tasks, like connecting with his children from a previous marriage in Michigan, contrasted with his apparent disengagement from JonBenét and Burke's daily lives. Linda noted no instances of John intervening when Patsy disciplined JonBenét, such as taking her to the bathroom to scold or possibly punish her for bedwetting, suggesting either ignorance or deliberate indifference. Notably, Linda's narrative lacks any mention of John displaying emotional distress, panic, or grief upon learning of JonBenét's disappearance or death, which she found conspicuous. This absence of recorded emotion made John appear suspiciously detached, a shadowy figure in the household who was physically present but emotionally absent. While Linda stopped short of directly accusing John of murder, her pointed remarks, like her sarcastic comment about his inability to hear a cannon, carried an undercurrent of blame, implying that his passivity enabled a toxic family environment. Linda's statements about John were not without contradictions. While she emphasized his detachment, she also acknowledged his cooperation with police, including interviews in June 1998 and his public defense of the family. She referenced a call John reported to police, where an anonymous caller accused Mervyn Pugh, Linda's husband, of being a molester and JonBenét's killer, a claim John dismissed. Despite her belief that John helped cover up the crime, Linda provided no concrete evidence linking him directly to the murder, and no physical evidence, DNA, fingerprints, or handwriting, tied him to the scene. Her focus remained on Patsy as the primary culprit, with John's role framed as complicit silence in a dysfunctional family dynamic. For the children, Linda described Burke, a 9-year-old at the time of the 1996 murder, as a typical but somewhat irresponsible child who, like his sister JonBenét, often left shoes, socks, and toys scattered around, contributing to a messy household. Linda noted Burke's habit of whittling with a red Swiss Army knife, which left wood shavings everywhere, prompting her to confiscate it in November 1996 and hide it on a cabinet top near JonBenét's room. This knife later appeared near JonBenét's body in the wine cellar, a detail Linda emphasized, asserting that only Patsy and John knew its location. She did not directly accuse Burke of involvement, likely due to his young age and lack of clear motive, but used the knife to bolster her theory that Patsy, or possibly John, was the perpetrator. Linda believed Burke was asleep in his room the night of December 25, 1996, with no recorded interactions with JonBenét or unusual behavior noted. She mentioned that Burke was expected to wake early the next morning for a planned family trip to Michigan, a detail Patsy handled, underscoring Burke's role as a passive participant in the family's preparations. Regarding JonBenét, a 6-year-old known for her pageant participation, Linda painted a picture of a lively, cheerful child who loved showing off her dresses and talking about her beauty contests. She described JonBenét as occasionally stubborn, insisting on tasks like putting on her shoes or opening the door for guests at a Chris party on December 23, 1996. But she also recalled JonBenét's enthusiasm for showing off her dresses and sharing stories about her competitions, often with a playful charm. Once, while watching TV in her parents' room, JonBenét placed a crown on Linda's head, a lighthearted moment that highlighted her childlike humor and warmth. Linda cared for JonBenét like her own daughter, tending to her daily needs, from cleaning up after her to occasionally driving her to dance lessons. Linda's statements about JonBenét's role in the case emphasized her vulnerability within a tense family dynamic. She described JonBenét as a handful, suggesting she could be challenging for an exhausted Patsy, who was juggling Christmas preparations, her 40th birthday, and recovery from ovarian cancer. Linda noted JonBenét's pageant life, recalling how Patsy once made her sleep in rollers to keep her hair perfect, a practice Linda questioned as unsuitable for a child. Despite this, she portrayed JonBenét as endearing, once playfully placing a pageant crown on Linda's head while watching TV. Linda's narrative suggested JonBenét lived under pressure to meet her mother's expectations, balancing a child's normalcy with the demands of pageants. She observed no specific interactions between JonBenét and Burke, nor between JonBenét and John, reinforcing her focus on Patsy's dominant role in the child's life. Linda's account of the crime scene included vivid details. She insisted the wine cellar's obscurity meant only Patsy or John could have chosen it, ruling out an intruder. However, Linda's claims lacked corroboration, as DNA under JonBenét's fingernails and on her underwear didn't match any family member or Linda, and no physical evidence linked Burke to the crime. Police interviewed Burke but dismissed him as a suspect due to his age and lack of evidence. Linda's focus remained on Patsy, with Burke's knife serving as a key detail to implicate her, not him, while JonBenét's bedwetting and pageant pressures framed the tragic catalyst for her death. The statements of Linda Hoffmann Pugh, the Ramsey family housekeeper from 1995 to 1996, can be juxtaposed with those of individuals who previously worked in the Ramsey household, in this case, Linda Wilcox, who served as a housekeeper from March 1993 to September 4, 1995. Wilcox, hired through her friend Suzanne Savage, a nanny for the Ramseys, worked for approximately 2.5 years, initially assisting Savage with cleaning duties before taking on the role full-time. Paid around $50,000 for a minimum 6-hour shift, Wilcox left due to inadequate compensation and scheduling conflicts, as she could earn more working for other clients. Her tenure overlapped with significant events in the Ramsey family, including Patsy's cancer treatment and the early years of JonBenét's life. Interviewed by the Boulder Police in February 1997, Wilcox provided insights into the family dynamics, the household environment, and specific details about the Ramsey home, which offer points of comparison and contrast with Hoffmann Pugh's accounts. While both women's statements align on certain observations about the Ramsey family's interpersonal relationships and JonBenét's bedwetting, they diverge in their focus, tone, and specific anecdotes, reflecting their different roles and time periods in the household. Both Linda Wilcox and Linda Hoffmann Pugh described the Ramsey household as emotionally distant, particularly in the relationship between John and Patsy Ramsey. Wilcox characterized their interactions as formal, likening them to amicably divorced business associates rather than a married couple, noting a lack of affection or warmth. She observed that Patsy acted more like John's secretary than his wife, a sentiment echoing Hoffmann Pugh's depiction of their cold and uncomfortable marriage, devoid of physical or verbal intimacy. Wilcox's account of cleaning the Ramsey bedroom supports this, as she found no signs of a vibrant marital life, such as affectionate notes or shared personal spaces, which aligns with Hoffmann Pugh's claim that Patsy confided in her about disliking intimacy with John. However, Wilcox's perspective is less accusatory, focusing on the professional nature of their relationship, rather than speculating on its impact on the murder case. Unlike Hoffmann Pugh, who used the strained marriage to bolster her theory of Patsy's culpability. Regarding JonBenét's bedwetting, both housekeepers confirmed it as a recurring issue, but their accounts differ in scope and emphasis. Wilcox noted that both JonBenét and Burke wet the bed during her time in the household, with JonBenét wearing pull-ups until at least age 4 and Burke until age 6. She found this unremarkable for young children, but observed that JonBenét's bedwetting worsened over time, becoming more frequent by the time she left in 1995, which she attributed to Patsy's shifting focus from Burke to JonBenét as her project. This aligns with Hoffmann Pugh's emphasis on JonBenét's chronic bedwetting as a source of Patsy's frustration, though Wilcox does not connect it directly to the murder. Instead, Wilcox's account provides context for the family's dynamics, suggesting that Patsy's attention to JonBenét's pageants coincided with increased bedwetting, a detail that supports Hoffmann Pugh's narrative, but lacks the latter's accusatory link to a violent outburst. Wilcox's stories about JonBenét reveal a child under pressure, but also highlight her personality in ways that complement Hoffmann Pugh's observations. She recounted JonBenét's involvement in pageants as a significant part of her life, driven by Patsy's pursuit of status. One poignant anecdote involved JonBenét, at age 4, refusing a trip to McDonald's because eating McDonald's makes you fat, a comment Wilcox attributed to Patsy's influence, reflecting the pressure on Benet to maintain a perfect image. This mirrors Hoffmann Pugh's description of JonBenét as a pageant-obsessed child under Patsy's strict control, such as sleeping in hair rollers. However, Wilcox also shared moments of JonBenét's charm, like when she modeled a '90s Easter dress or declared herself a good, sexy witch in a 1994 Halloween costume, a phrase prompted by Patsy. These stories align with Hoffmann Pugh's portrayal of JonBenét as a lively, endearing child, but lack the focus on her as a victim of Patsy's rage, instead emphasizing the broader family environment. Burke Ramsey's portrayal by Wilcox shares similarities with Hoffmann Pugh's, but is less detailed. Wilcox described Burke as a typical child who lived in his own world, centered around friends and sleepovers, and who, like JonBenét, was spoiled, left toys and clothes scattered. She noted his bedwetting, which stopped when Patsy shifted her attention to JonBenét, a detail that aligns with Hoffmann Pugh's observation of both children's umptedness, but adds a psychological angle absent in Hoffmann Pugh's account. Wilcox also mentioned Burke's whittling with a Swiss Army knife, though she did not connect it to the crime scene, unlike Hoffmann Pugh, who highlighted the knife's discovery near JonBenét's body as evidence implicating Patsy. Wilcox's lack of interaction with Burke after 1995 limits her account, and she does not speculate on his role in the murder, contrasting with Hoffmann Pugh's use of the knife to support her theory. Wilcox's anecdotes about the Ramsey household provide unique details that both corroborate and diverge from Hoffmann Pugh's narrative. One striking story involved a flood in the Ramsey home over Thanksgiving 1994, caused by a painter, Jay, leaving a window open, which allowed wind to turn on a hot water faucet. Wilcox spent 12 hours cleaning the resulting damage, noting John's anger when he returned and stood in the wet bathtub to close the window, despite his strict habit of never wearing shoes in the house. This incident, absent from Hoffmann Pugh's account, underscores John's temper and self-control, aligning with Hoffmann Pugh's view of him as emotionally restrained, but potentially volatile. Another story involved John turning off Wilcox's vacuum cleaner without a word, while she cleaned the master bedroom, annoyed by the noise, which supports Hoffmann Pugh's depiction of John as easily irritated and detached. Wilcox's discovery of a floor safe in the wine cellar, which she showed to Patsy, Nidra, and Suzanne Savage, adds a layer to the household's layout that resonates with Hoffmann Pugh's emphasis on the wine cellar's obscurity. Wilcox described the cellar as damp, moldy, and rarely used, corroborating Hoffmann Pugh's claim that only Patsy and John knew its location. Though Wilcox did not directly tie this to the murder, she also noted a large photograph of an aircraft carrier labeled Subic Bay Training Center in John's bedroom, a detail not mentioned by Hoffmann Pugh, which highlights John's personal history, but does not directly relate to the crime. Similarly, Wilcox's observation of a college frame with photos of John's deceased daughter Beth, kept in his bathroom, adds a peculiar detail about his private life, absent from Hoffmann Pugh's statements, suggesting an emotional attachment, but not directly implicating him in the case. The tone and intent of Wilcox's statements differ markedly from Hoffmann Pugh's. While Hoffmann Pugh was outspoken and accusatory, claiming to know the killer's identity and focusing on Patsy's guilt, Wilcox expressed a gut feeling that a stranger didn't kill that child based on the house's layout and the unlikelihood of an intruder navigating it undetected. Wilcox's accounts are more observational, focusing on family dynamics and household quirks, such as JonBenét's bottle use at age 4 or the dog Jack's being swapped due to illness. Her stories, like the McDonald's incident or the Halloween costume, reveal a household where Patsy's ambitions shaped JonBenét's life, but Wilcox stops short of constructing a murder narrative. In contrast, Hoffmann Pugh's detailed theory of Patsy's actions relies heavily on speculation, using similar observations to build a case. Both housekeepers faced scrutiny from the Boulder police, with Wilcox interviewed in February 1997 and providing palm prints, but not hair or handwriting samples. Her cooperation and willingness to share details contrast with Hoffmann Pugh's frustration at being ignored by authorities, though both felt the Ramseys were evasive. Wilcox's comment that the police asked why the Ramseys wouldn't talk aligns with Hoffmann Pugh's sense of being sidelined, but Wilcox's less confrontational stance and earlier departure from the household before the murder limit her accusations. Ultimately, Wilcox's stories provide a broader context for the Ramsey family's life, complementing Hoffmann Pugh's more pointed narrative while highlighting different facets of the same dysfunctional environment. Too close to be innocent. Linda Hoffmann Pugh didn't just clean the Ramsey house. She moved through it like someone who knew where everything belonged, where things were hidden, where habits lived. As the family's housekeeper for over a year leading up to JonBenét's murder, she knew their routines better than most friends did. And that familiarity, once innocent, slowly shifted in the public eye after December 26th, when the question wasn't just who could have done this, but who had access to do it. The Ramseys themselves offered Linda's name to investigators early on, not because she had a criminal record, not because she was seen near the house, but because this didn't look like a random break-in. The garrote, the handwritten note, the red Swiss Army knife used to cut tape, these weren't brought in from outside. They were household items. Linda knew where the knife was stored, tucked in a cupboard near JonBenét's room. According to her, only she and Patsy knew it was there, but after the murder, it turned up on a table, near the child's body. That detail, more than anything, eroded the intruder theory in some minds. And while Linda's handwriting didn't match the ransom letter, and her DNA wasn't found at the scene, suspicion lingered, not just because of what she knew, but how she felt. Financial strain didn't just shadow Linda's life, it threatened to collapse it. In the months before the crime, she'd asked Patsy to lend her $2,000, not as a casual favor, as a desperate plea. Patsy said no. And John Ramsey, to Linda's knowledge, never acknowledged the request. At the same time, she'd been paid a holiday bonus of $300, a modest gesture, but days later, when the ransom note demanded exactly $118,000, the same amount as John's Christmas bonus, Linda noticed. Everyone did. For some, it was coincidence. For others, it was staging, someone close enough to know John's finances, and bitter enough to use that knowledge to manipulate suspicion. A small bonus, a rejected loan, a child found dead. One by one, those facts didn't add up to guilt. But to a trained profiler, they whispered motive. Psychologically, Linda's position was delicate. She was neither family nor stranger. She was trusted, yet peripheral. Inside, but never fully included. That tension can curdle, especially when layered with financial stress and perceived dismissal. Watching a wealthy family live in luxury while her own bills piled up, while her effort remained largely invisible, may have worn on her psyche. Not enough to kill, but perhaps enough to harbor resentment. The human mind doesn't always process inequality with logic. Sometimes, it turns unfairness into a story, a justification, a reason, and in environments of silence and class divide, that narrative, real or imagined, can twist into something volatile. But Linda didn't remain silent. As mentioned above, in interviews and later testimony, she openly to believe Patsy was the one who killed JonBenét. She described it not as a murder, but a panic, an accident turned cover-up. She laid out a scene in chilling detail, an outburst of rage, a flashlight to the head, a garrote fashioned from paintbrush and cord, all to cover a moment that couldn't be taken back. Linda didn't say this out of malice. She said it because, in her view, it was the only explanation that made sense. Her theory was never proven. It was never formally accepted. But even some detectives admitted, off the record, that it wasn't without merit. What makes Linda's case unusual isn't just the suspicion cast upon her. It's the fact that she returned it. She pointed fingers. She gave names. And while her alibi may have checked out, her knowledge of the home, her access to tools later found near the body, and her emotional proximity to the family kept her name in the narrative, quietly, persistently, not as the villain, not as the victim, but as someone who stood too close to both. To understand the full weight of suspicion placed on Linda Hoffmann Pugh, one must see beyond her role as a housekeeper and into the economic realities that shaped her daily life. Linda wasn't just working for the Ramseys. She was surviving beside them. As they lived in a mansion adorned with garlands and gold, she was folding sheets in the same home while worrying if she could afford groceries next week. Her bonus that holiday season, the $300, was a fraction of the $118,000 payout John Ramsey had just received. She didn't resent them openly. But numbers like that don't just fade, they linger. Especially when you're barely scraping by. In a move that revealed just how thin the line was between dignity and desperation, Linda asked Patsy for a $2,000 loan. It wasn't for luxury, it was to keep her household afloat. But the request was denied. Patsy didn't report it, she didn't discuss it with John, and according to what's known, the matter ended quietly, on their side. For Linda, it likely festered. Because when you serve a family whose refrigerator is stocked with holiday platters and French bottled water, and you go home to unpaid bills, the distance between rooms becomes a canyon. The rejection didn't just hurt financially. It could have bruised something deeper: pride, self-worth, and the unspoken rules of trust that often form between domestic staff and their employers. And that emotional fracture widened when people like Jameson, an amateur sleuth with a keyboard and a mission, began casting shadows on Linda's family, claiming her daughter appeared on illicit websites, calling her husband a predator, or Erwin the molester. Cause Linda's husband may have sold photos of their own child for cash, suggesting, even without proof, that desperation had turned into something criminal. These accusations, while ultimately discredited, didn't just live on message boards. They bled into Linda's real life, into her privacy, into her reputation. The Fort Lupton police own 6-week investigation into her family based on those rumors. CBI got involved. Even Lou Smith, the former lead investigator on the Ramsey case, took a second look. In the end, Nothing came of it. No arrests, no charges, no more silence. But by then, the damage had already seeped in. Not legally, psychologically. Under that kind of scrutiny, public, financial, emotional, it's not hard to imagine how Linda might have felt cornered, betrayed by the people she once served, exploited by strangers she'd never met. Watching her daughter be dragged into the public narrative as if poverty alone made them suspects. Even if she had nothing to hide, she was made to live as if she did. And for a woman already carrying the quiet indignity of unpaid debt and denied help, those accusations weren't just noise. They were pressure. Heavy, invisible, and relentless. The kind of pressure that doesn't just exhaust, it isolates. But what if Linda's presence in the Ramsey home didn't just leave behind fingerprints on laundry baskets or smudges on kitchen counters? What if it left behind influence, quiet, cumulative, and corrosive? Long before she became a name on a suspect list, Linda was already embedded in the family's daily rhythms. She wasn't just folding clothes or scrubbing tiles. She was observing, absorbing, and perhaps nudging. According to accounts from close acquaintances and later testimonies, Linda had strong opinions about discipline, particularly when it came to the Nay's recurring issue with bedwetting. She saw the soiled sheets. She cleaned them. But she didn't just do her job in silence. Over time, she began to voice her frustration to Patsy. Subtly at first, then with increasing edge. It wasn't just concern, it became criticism. Patsy, already fraying under the pressure of perfection, may have taken those words to heart. "You're too soft on her," Linda reportedly suggested. "She needs consequences." The implication was clear: this wasn't a harmless phase. It was defiance. And that narrative, once planted, had the potential to take root and twist. At the same time, Linda's interactions with Burke revealed a different dynamic. Where JonBenét basked in attention, Burke faded, often left out of public photos, pageant weekends, and dinner table praise. To a child, that imbalance becomes a wound. And Linda, knowingly or not, may have picked at it. She would chat with Burke during chores, acknowledge his presence in ways his parents often didn't. Some accounts suggest she framed his role as the quiet one with an undertone of virtue, making space for resentment to bloom. "Your sister's always the star," she might have mused aloud. "But you're the one who really thinks." Praise wrapped in comparison. Attention delivered through subtle contrast. It wasn't direct manipulation. It was emotional suggestion. And for a 9-year-old already grappling with envy, it may have felt like truth. Even the Ramseys' marriage wasn't immune to Linda's presence. Patsy, exhausted and stretched thin, occasionally vented to Linda about John's distance, his long hours, his emotional remove. Rather than diffusing the tension, Linda, perhaps emboldened by proximity, fueled it. Not with accusations, but with sympathy weaponized into suspicion. "He's always away," she reportedly noted. "You do everything here." It wasn't a lie. But it wasn't neutral either. Over time, such reminders don't just validate frustration, they amplify it. And as the cracks in John and Patsy's relationship widened, so did Linda's influence. She became more than a housekeeper. She became a sounding board, a mirror, and sometimes a wedge. Psychologically, this dynamic wasn't built overnight. It was shaped over months, maybe years, of quiet insinuation and emotional calibration. Patsy, battling illness and the invisible expectations of a pageant mother, grew to rely on Linda in ways that blurred the lines between employer and confidante. And when boundaries blur, influence grows, not through commands, through proximity, through availability, through the subtle assurance that someone sees what you're going through and that they understand. In this way, Linda didn't need to raise her voice to shape the house she worked in. She only needed to be present, consistent, and patient. But influence alone is rarely enough. For someone to shape narratives or distort them, they need more than proximity. They need incentive. And in Linda Hoffmann Pugh's case, that incentive may have been layered. Not obvious, but very real. At the surface level, she wasn't just a housekeeper. Over time, she had become an emotional fixture in the Ramsey home, present for vulnerable moments, privy to secrets rarely shared beyond bedroom walls. In that role, there's a kind of quiet power, a feeling of insider status. And, for someone outside the family name, that sense of control can become intoxicating. It's subtle, but it matters. Knowing when John left, when Patsy cried, what made Burke snap. That kind of access builds a sense of leverage, a belief that she, too, mattered in the ecosystem of the Ramsey household, not just as a cleaner, but as a witness, a holder of truths. And sometimes, being the holder of truth tempts you to become the teller of your own version of it. Some believe Linda may have wanted more than acknowledgement, that her knowledge wasn't just a burden, it was a commodity. There were rumors, never fully proven, that she sought to capitalize on her proximity to the crime. That perhaps she intended to write a book, an exposé, a memoir, a tell-all. But Colorado law made that difficult. Under the state's statutes, any profits derived from discussing an active criminal case one may be involved in could trigger legal scrutiny, especially if that individual had been a person of interest. Still, the intent, the ambition, might have already taken root. Even if the law stood in the way, the motivation, the idea of turning trauma into narrative, and narrative into money, had already flickered to life. Then there were the accusations that cut deeper. Claims circulated on message boards like web sleuths, and echoed by figures like Jameson, that Linda had sold photographs to tabloids, that she used her insider knowledge not just to assist investigators, but to feed headlines. Most of these accusations were unsubstantiated, but the mere existence of them painted a troubling portrait of a woman potentially willing to trade fragments of a child's tragedy for financial gain. Whether she did or not became less important than the perception that she might. And once that perception takes hold, especially in a case so public, so painfully dissected, it's hard to pull it back. Psychologically, it raises a chilling possibility. That for Linda, the truth, whatever it was never just about justice. It was about positioning. If she couldn't rise within the family, perhaps she could rise outside of it. Not as a silent servant, but as a voice, a character, someone who mattered in the retelling. In a world where being near tragedy grants instant notoriety, especially when the tragedy involves beauty, wealth, and a murdered child, proximity becomes currency. And perhaps Linda understood that all too well. In the end, Linda Hoffmann Pugh wasn't just part of the scenery in the Ramsey home, she was embedded in its fabric. Her fingerprints weren't on the body, but her presence lingered in the rooms, in the routines, in the trust she was given, and, perhaps, in the cracks she helped widen. Whether out of desperation, bitterness, or the slow erosion of boundaries between employee and confidante, Linda became more than just a witness to the family's unraveling, she became part of its story. Not as the killer, not as the savior, but as someone who stood close enough to see everything, and close enough to be seen. In a case defined by blurred lines, Linda's role remains one of the most unsettling. Not because of what she did, but because of what she might have shaped, said, or suggested when no one else was paying attention. Suspicious details and evidence. When detectives expanded the scope of inquiry beyond the Ramsey mansion and into the homes of those in close orbit, Linda Hoffmann Pugh's residence became a logical point of interest. What they found didn't mount to criminal evidence, but it didn't go unnoticed either. Among the common items in her possession were a standard black Sharpie marker, a lined notepad, and a length of cord resembling the kind used to construct the garrote. Each, on its own, was ordinary, innocuous, the kind of tools found in any utility drawer or supply box. But in the context of a murdered child, their presence took on an uncomfortable gravity. Investigators noted the similarities, quietly, cautiously. The notepad's paper stock, while not identical to the ransom note, was close enough in texture and ruling to merit documentation. The Sharpie, a common brand, matched the ink type used in the handwritten or left behind at the crime scene. And the cord, though frayed differently at the ends, mimicked the texture and thickness of the ligature used on JonBenét. It wasn't evidence, it was coincidence. And yet, coincidences have weight when they echo the details of a homicide. Linda offered explanations readily. The Sharpie was for labeling bins. The notebook, for grocery lists and reminders. The rope had been part of old lawn equipment her husband hadn't yet tossed. Nothing sinister, nothing concealed. And crucially, nothing tested matched back to the Ramsey seen in a way that held up under forensic scrutiny. Her home was not a vault of secrets. It was a snapshot of working-class normalcy, messy, practical, and, in this case, unfortunately familiar. Still, the implications lingered. Not because of what those items proved, but because of what they suggested, that the tools required to replicate the Ramsey murder weren't specialized or rare. They were accessible, familiar, and perhaps already within reach long before the crime ever occurred. That reality reframed the investigation's scope, not just who had the intent or opportunity, but who lived in proximity to possibility. For Linda, those items became part of the narrative, not because they incriminated her, but because they underscored just how thin the wall was between innocence and suspicion. The boundary wasn't marked by weapons or confessions, but by Sharpies and string. And in a case where nothing seemed random, even the mundane took on menace. Among the many troubling details in the JonBenét Ramsey case, few were as quietly damning as the knowledge of what belonged where. Not just inside drawers, but inside routine. Linda Hoffmann Pugh didn't just step over the Ramsey threshold with keys in hand, she stepped in with an understanding of their inner world. And within that understanding lay access. Familiarity. The kind that turns ordinary household items into instruments of suspicion. Take the red Swiss Army knife. According to Linda's own account, it was stored in a cabinet near JonBenét's room. A tucked-away spot that only she and Patsy knew about. Yet, after the murder, that knife wasn't in its usual place. It was found out of context, laid on a table in the same basement where JonBenét's body was discovered. Not bloodied, not broken, but present. And its function, capable of slicing tape, trimming cord, carving wood, quietly matched the needs of someone constructing a garrote or staging a crime. Then there was the paintbrush. Not just any brush, but one taken from Patsy's own art kit. Broken. Repurposed. Used as the handle of the murder device. Its origin wasn't in question, it came from the home. But again, it wasn't stored openly. It was kept among other art supplies, in a specific container only a handful of people had reason to search. Linda, by nature of her role, knew where it was. She tidied the space. She cleaned around it. She once handed brushes to Patsy, knew which ones were old and which had snapped ends. That kind of casual awareness, in a vacuum, means nothing. In a murder case, it becomes potential insight, or implication. No fingerprints of Linda's were found on either item. No trace evidence linking her directly to their use. But her knowledge of them, quiet, routine, unremarkable before the crime, suddenly became part of the case file, because whoever used them didn't bring them in. They were selected, retrieved, assembled. And that requires not just access, but familiarity. You don't improvise with tools you didn't know existed. You don't break a paintbrush in the dark, unless you knew where to find it in the light. It's this layer of knowledge, not motive, not opportunity, that makes Linda's presence hard to dismiss entirely. She didn't just clean around the tools later used in the murder. She knew they were there. And in a case with no signs of forced entry, with the staging pointing inward, that kind of silent inventory matters. Because in a house full of clues, the deadliest details might have been hiding in plain sight, right where someone like Linda would have known to look. There was no book. Not officially. No cover. No publisher. No release date. And yet, within the pages of an unpublished manuscript attributed to Linda Hoffmann Pugh, something stirred, a version of the truth too specific to ignore. Too private to have come from pure imagination. The details weren't vague. They weren't speculative. They were surgical. JonBenét wasn't murdered by a stranger, but struck, blunt force to the head, inflicted by a flashlight. Not random, not accidental. Deliberate. Then came the garrote. A paintbrush handle, a length of cord. As if someone tried to overwrite the original cause of death. A cover-up. A moment of rage, followed by calculation. And that's what disturbed investigators most. Not the accusation. but the accuracy. Linda described the crime scene in unnerving precision, where the body lay, how the staging occurred, which objects were used, and why. She spoke of the tape, the location of the blanket, the quiet concealment in the basement room, and she spoke not as a witness, but as someone reconstructing a moment from inside the walls, from inside the intent. There was no forensic evidence tying Linda to the murder. No physical trace. No confession. But the book, unfinished, unprinted, yet undeniably detailed, raised one question investigators couldn't shake. How did she know all that? Was it deduction? Was it gossip? Or was it something else? Because if she was wrong, it was a masterclass in informed speculation. But if she was right, if every detail she outlined tracked with evidence that hadn't been made public, then Linda wasn't just speculating. She was reliving, recounting, reconstructing something she may have seen, or sensed, or silently known all along. And that, perhaps, was the most haunting part. Not what was written, but what was never published. It wasn't just where they found her. It was how. JonBenét wasn't left in the open. She wasn't placed by the stairs, or posed in a panic. She was hidden in the furthest, coldest part of the house. A narrow space at the back of the basement, behind a wooden door with no markings. The wine cellar. A room that didn't show up on casual blueprints. A place not easily discovered, unless you already knew it was there. And according to whoever knew it lived there, only John and Patsy knew it existed. But someone else had found it, and left her there. Wrapped in a familiar white blanket, her wrists bound with nylon cord, a strip of duct tape over her mouth, a garrote fashioned from paintbrush and twine still around her neck, not a single item traced back to an outsider. All of it, household. Domestic. Intimate. From inside. The tape. From the drawer in the hobby room. The cord. Matching the kind Patsy used for craft storage. The blanket. Pulled straight from JonBenét's own bed. The paintbrush handle used in the garrote. Snapped from Patsy's art kit in the basement. All signs pointed inward. No signs of forced entry. No muddy boot prints. Just evidence of someone who moved with confidence. Someone who didn't search. Someone who knew. And in that narrow list of people who had such access, who understood the layout, who handled the family's belongings daily, Linda Hoffmann Pugh's name couldn't be ignored. She knew the rhythms of the house, where things were kept, what doors stuck, what rooms stayed locked. She folded those blankets. She cleaned that floor. She walked that basement. She might have seen that cellar door more times than anyone else besides the family. No DA placed her there. No fingerprints. But in a case built less on blood and more on presence, Linda's familiarity with the setting turned proximity into suspicion. Because whoever did this didn't just kill a child. They concealed her. In a place that wasn't meant to be found. And that, more than anything, ruled out strangers. It wasn't a break-in. It was something far worse. It was someone already inside. The last door only trust could open. The murder of JonBenét Ramsey didn't happen in a storm of chaos. It wasn't reckless. It was deliberate. And in that staging, there were choices. What to use. What to write. Where to place the body. And none of those choices felt random. They felt informed. As if someone knew what to leave behind and what to erase. Someone who wasn't guessing. Someone who understood. That's why suspicion never really left Linda Hoffmann Pugh. Not because of evidence that could convict her. There was none. Not because she broke down under questioning. She didn't. But because Linda, more than most, existed in the space between family and staff. She didn't just witness their lives, she supported them. She served them. She watched them. And when things got tense, she was the one person Patsy vented to. The one person who walked past locked doors without knocking. The one person whose hands touched everything, but whose presence rarely left a trace. That kind of access is invisible until something goes wrong. Then suddenly, every mop, every folded towel, every passing comment becomes part of the equation. Especially when the crime scene includes a paintbrush only she and Patsy knew was there. Especially when the ransom note, is left beside a checkbook in the exact drawer Linda once helped organize. Especially when a Swiss Army knife, stored in a cupboard she alone mentioned, ends up by the child's body. All household objects. All known to Linda. None traced to a stranger. Even the wine cellar, that hidden back room, wasn't a place most guests could stumble into. But Linda wasn't a guest. She was trusted. And trust, once broken, doesn't need fingerprints to leave scars. It just needs doubt. Then came the unpublished book. A manuscript Linda drafted, never released, but later referenced in court filings and interviews. In it, she laid out a vivid theory of the murder: a flashlight, a blow to the head, a garrote, panic, staging. Every element matched forensics later offered by detectives. Some said it was intuitive. Others weren't so sure. Because some of those details had never been made public. How did she know? Perhaps she guessed. Or perhaps she heard enough over time to reconstruct the puzzle. But some wondered if the Buddhan theory, if it was catharsis, or confession, by proxy, a way to place blame while indirectly revealing something deeper. Not guilt, but knowledge. Knowledge only an insider could have. And in a case this broken, that knowledge was enough to fracture everything. Linda's defenders argue she was scapegoated. A working-class woman in a rich family's shadow, caught in a storm of suspicion because she fit the wrong narrative. Not pretty, not powerful, just present. But her critics, quiet, ask another question: if she truly had no deeper involvement, why did she stay so close to the fire? Why write the book? Why go on air? Why not disappear? Because maybe, in the end, Linda wasn't trying to hide. Maybe she was trying to matter. In a story where power belonged to the wealthy, and the spotlight belonged to the dead, maybe Linda wanted her place too, not as the villain, but as the one who knew. The one who tried to speak. The one who saw it coming. And in that effort, she gave voice to something no detective, no jury, and no evidence could quite pin down. That sometimes the person who knows the most isn't the killer. They're just the one who was always listening.